I want to talk about going back to school. And this is for those people that, they're probably not in their 20s. They're probably much older than that. And they have their life together. It's all said and done. And they're thinking of doing that. So probably somebody that's in their 60s. And they're considering going back to school, or they actually are going back to school at this moment. I want to tell you right now that you are absolutely crazy. And that's actually a wonderful thing, to be honest. But you're absolutely crazy. You're going and doing things completely opposite of what everybody else has said. And I want to talk about a few things with this, right? So the first thing is why do people think that it's actually crazy? Well, they think that you should be done. Your whole life is over at this moment, right? You have it all settled. It's all figured out. I want to tell you, who the heck has their life figured out? I am 43 years old. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. My life is all kind of figured out at this moment. And quote unquote a prestigious professor, or whatever the heck that actually means. I don't even know if but, the whole thing is kind of messed up if you think about it. And we sort of consider that we should have our life figured out by the time that we're 25 years old. And then after that, our life is all spelled out in front of us. It's all carved in stone. And then when we are 50 years old, we're done, right? We get put out to pasture and nobody will ever consider what we're actually doing. And, all of those kind of things, all those sort of myths that are out there. And it's kind of crazy, right? If you actually think about it, we're living far longer than we've ever lived. Especially if you live a healthy lifestyle, or if you do all of the healthy things, expect to live well into your hundreds at this moment, right? Well into it. And it's crazy that we would say halfway through our life, we're just going to give up on it. And that's it. It's done. How bizarre is that as a decision that anybody would ever make, that you would say as an investment? Think of your body as an investment, right? You've got a mind and a body, and this valuable asset, right? If you imagine yourself as a machine or a factory, and you have this valuable asset, and it sits underutilized for 50 years after that, what a terrible use of mechanics of resources that we actually have, right? It's terrible. Now, the other thing that you often would think about is okay, nobody's going to hire me because I'm old after this. Yes, if you do things where you take a degree that is, so I'm going to pick on this, right? So I actually have an engineering degree and a partly finished sociology degree. I was a couple courses short of double majoring. But anyways, so if you take something like that, like a sociology degree, it's amazing. You learn so much, you understand why people are just absolutely weird. And, you just become a little bit more of a kinder person because you realize that everybody is really screwed up. But, right, if you take something like that, it's going to be harder to get a job. It's going to be less of an opportunity. But that's no different if you're 20 years old and you take a sociology degree. It's going to be hard to get a job, right? But, man, if you take a computer programming degree and you learn all of the same basic stuff, and you take things about how to develop an AI, and you do all this crazy stuff, all the crazy math, and you do that, you're going to be super valuable. Nobody's going to hesitate to not hire you. Seriously, how silly is that? You might be thinking okay, I can't learn that. I'm not as fast of a learner. I forget all that kind of stuff when I am, 60 years old. Yeah, we might have some decay in our ability as we get older. But to what extent is that decay, right? People think that it's this dramatic decay and all of a sudden we're bottomized. We can't do anything. But we're talking a percentage or a couple of percentage. Maybe, it's an extreme case we have 75% brain function when we're 60 years old, and we're operating like a 75% of what somebody would be in their 20s, which by all means, it seems crazy to me, but maybe that's the case, right? And if that's the case, that still means you're going to operate, particularly if you're a reasonably intelligent person, you're still operating far better than what the actual average person is operating at, particularly those 20-year-olds that know absolutely nothing about the world. They have like very little wisdom at that point. No offense to you, if you're 20, but you don't, right? You just haven't lived a whole bunch of stuff. You haven't experienced a whole bunch of stuff, and the only way that you can actually get there and live and do all that kind of stuff is actually living through it. And then you'll understand what I'm actually talking about. But the other thing that you'll realize is that particularly younger generations, but not all, right? Like, I don't want to generalize in any sort of way, but a lot of younger folks today have a tremendous amount of apathy. And so, and even older folks. And so if you're that one person that still has gumption, you still want to try to figure out stuff, not only are you going to have gumption when you're in your, 60s beyond what everybody else is doing, but and then you'll have way more gumption than somebody that's like 20 years old, right? Like, and if I was hiring, and if you actually did this correctly, right? You're doing this for a job, for example. And if I was hiring and I saw that and you said, hey, I decided to go back to school, get a computer science degree or get a computer engineering degree or whatever, right? And I decided to do that after this entire second career and life and everything. My kids are grown and gone and all that kind of stuff. Like, every employer would be like, we got to consider this person. That's an incredible story. Like, don't discount yourself, but you have to work for it. You'll have to get up and get going and tell that story, and there'll be a lot of challenges along the way. So, the third thing is thinking about, what kind of value are you going to get from an education? Honestly, I can't predict that. The sort of returns in education is really hard to figure out. And economists have this sort of view of measuring things in terms of salary. And I'm not trying to pick on economists, but like any researcher sort of does that. And you might look at like salary and stuff like that, and their general rule is for each year of education, you can add beyond university, right? Or beyond high school, you can add an extra 10%, or sorry, $100,000, going up a hill, a little winded, an extra $100,000 to what $10,000 to what you're making. So if you've been, you go to 10 years of university, you probably make about $100,000 or so. This is a general rough rule. It's not perfect, but it sort of makes sense. So if you're to do that, there is some economic returns, but I don't think like at that age you're considering that. It's probably not necessarily all that important. Some of you might be. Some of you are just considering it because you want to grow as a person. And how do you measure that? Honestly, you can't, right? And the only thing that you can measure is, the only thing I can say for me is that I've I understand a little bit more nuance. I think that's the key, is that I don't know everything, and I think maybe that's an indication of actually knowing some things. I really don't know things, but there's a whole bunch of nuance that exists in this world that's hard to capture, and there's no right answers. I don't know, to be honest, but I do think like there is something value added there that is hard to capture. The first one is sort of the status effects and all that kind of stuff, but you're not going to get that as much. But I think a key thing, in terms of personal growth, you do learn some things, and that sort of learning does kind of change your outlook on life. Maybe might not change the tone of that outlook, but man, you definitely grow. And then the other thing that I think is probably the most important reason, and I've said this before, is imagine if you have a nephew, a niece, your great-granddaughter or whatever that's watching, and they see that, and they see you doing something that is absolutely crazy. It's truly crazy, and people are making fun of you, and you're doing it anyways, right? Despite the fact that it's all crazy, it makes no sense, but you're doing it, and it's something that's healthy. I don't know what else there would be. You're just reading. Maybe you're watching some videos these days. It's just healthy, and you're doing that. Like, isn't that what you're supposed to be doing as an adult? Isn't that what we should be doing as, role models, as leaders for all the other people that are in your family and around you? I just think it's pretty cool to be able to do that and to stick with something that actually is hard. Going to school is hard. It's never, it's not an easy process. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. And if you add all that up, right, I think the costs are relatively minimal. You can go do education anywhere. And I think it's just, I don't know. There's something about it that I just think is pretty darn cool. And man, even if you're doing free education, right? You're doing like YouTube videos that are about education. There's lots of stuff out there by really famous researchers and professors and, teachers and all sorts of folks. They're doing really great stuff. And if you did that, you're the one person that actually sort of picked up on that kind of stuff and you did it, I think that would be really cool. I'm getting all twisted up with these doggies. All right, take care. Have a good one.